Om Tat Sat. Illargu Namaskara. Good evening, friends. I would like to begin by offering my gratitude to some of the people who have sent very nice messages to me about yesterday's lecture. Some of my friends and my parents, even some of the elders like Professor L.V. Shantkumari called me earlier today and said that she saw the lecture, and Dr. Ganesh was very encouraging. I hope this guidance and encouragement continues for a long time. We saw the first 3 volumes so far, and we now come to the 4th volume, which is in Kannada called Mysurina Divanarugadu, and in English the Divans of Mysore. It is the biggest volume in the 8, probably close second is the 8th volume. And here DVG talks about the 6 decades before independence. And right at the beginning of this book, in the section titled Arike, which is like submission or appeal, he says, among the volumes of my art gallery of memories, given the current state of affairs in the country, the present one is more relevant and contemporary, because we can see a lot of things of the past in the polity in contrast with what is happening in the time DVG wrote it, and it holds true even today. When we look at some of these things in the in comparison with the political developments of the country in the last 50 years and even today, we see that a lot of things what he has said is very relevant. It is because the subject of this volume is politics. I feel that unless our polity attains a state of maturity, no aspect of our social life can attain maturity. We are yet to figure out a system of governance appropriate for us. For those who wish to cogitate upon this topic, the present work may contain some details that may be of assistance. So we have still not figured out, he says, what is the system of governance that is suitable to us. Because although for many years D.V. Gundappa was an advocate of democracy, finally when we got democracy and he saw what happened in the way the democratic system was functioning in India, he had second thoughts. Maybe he said that responsible government was not the way to go. Maybe there are some other things. So for anybody who wants to understand this better, the 4th volume of Jnapaka-chitra-shaale will be very instructive. This book talks about the 6 decades before independence. Why 6 decades? What is this magic number of 60 that is so alluring? Right at the beginning, in the first chapter called The System of Governance Before Independence, DVG mentions that as per the Hindu calendar, a period of 60 years is called a paryaya. So from the start of the Prabhava Samvatsara until the next Akshaya at the end of it is Akshaya Samvatsara. So from one Prabhava Samvatsara to the next, it's a period of 60 years. And he says we can imagine this to be 60 spokes in the wheel of Kala Purusha's chariot. The Kala Purusha is time personified, and the wheels of Kala Purusha represent 2 things. One is the dynamism of time, and second is the cyclical nature of time. When compared to the Western world, in India, time is seen as cyclical, because whatever we have in our tradition, Sanatana Dharma, is basically what we have learned from nature. And when we observe nature, we find that time is cyclical. So there is sunrise and sunset, and the revolution of the sun, the earth around its own axis is 1 unit of a day and a night, which is cyclical. So there is day, and after day there is night, and so on. Then as the earth goes around the sun, we have the different seasons, which is again cyclical. As the moon goes around the earth, we have the pakshas. So the lunar month, which consists of the Krishna Paksha and the Shukla Paksha, again cyclical. So looking at nature, the Indian conception of time itself was cyclical. And in the Western conception of time, it is linear, because God created world on a certain day, and there will be judgment day, and that's the start and the end of life. Whereas in our system, there is constant Srishti, Sthiti, Laya, Shunya, again Srishti, Sthiti, Laya, and so on. This 60-year period of a Samvatsara, called Shashtyabdi, is a very meaningful segment, which is also why even in the life of an individual, this is celebrated as the Shashtyabda Purti. And therefore, DVG takes the period of 60 years. When he wrote this volume probably in the 70s, this was already, it had been a couple of decades since we had got independence. He writes, it's been close to 30 years since one such Shashtyabda Paryaya in the history of Mysore came to an end. To my knowledge, labeling those 60 years from the Vikram Samvatsara of 1881 to the Vikram Samvatsara of 1940 as a golden epoch would not be an overstatement. So 1881 marks the time when the British gave back the sovereignty to the Mysore kingdom, and 1940 is the time is the year when Krishnaraja Wadiyar IV passed away. So that period of 60 years is what he's considering in this book. DVG broadly divides the history of India into the Pauranika Yuga and the Charitrika Yuga. This is a very broad division. Pauranika refers to mostly some of the old stories, what we can loosely call as mythology. And the Charitrika Yuga is where we have all the evidences. So when we talk about 20,000 years back something happened, or 1 lakh years, the Krita Yuga lasts for so many hundreds and thousands of years, and the division of the yugas, and these things should not be taken literally but rather metaphorically. When we say Charitrika Yuga, that is when we have archaeological findings and astronomical, genetic, literary evidence, and so many other kinds of evidence that help us recreate the history. The history of the Mysore kingdom over the last 500 years, DVG divides into 5 different sections. Starting from the installation of Yaduraja Wadayar in 1399, which represents the start of the Wadayar dynasty in a sense, all the way to the invasion of Nawab Hyder Ali in 1760. This is one period. The second period is from this invasion of Hyder Ali till the death of Tippu Sultan in 1799. From the death of Tippu Sultan in 1799, then the third Krishnaraja Wadiyar, Mummudi Krishnaraja Wadiyar, comes to the throne on the 30th of June. From there until the British occupation of Mysore, 1831, is the third stage. The 50 years of British rule, where they directly governed the Mysore kingdom from 1831 to 1881, is the fourth stage. And the fifth stage is from the time the royal family assumed power, 25th March 1881, until the death of Nalvadi Krishnaraja Wadiyar on 3rd August 1940. So this last period, the fifth stage, is what DVG discusses in the volume of the Divans of Mysore. Starting from the first Divan in the post 1881 period, Divan Rangacharlu, all the way up to Divan M.N. Krishnarao, who was the acting Divan at the end of the reign of Krishnaraja Wadiyar. This is the period that is covered. So in this 1881 to 1940, 10 Divans plus M.N. Krishnarao was an acting Divan. So we have 10 Divans. Rangacharlu, Sheshadri Iyer, then Tambu Chetty, P.N. Krishnamurti, Madhav Rao, Anand Rao, Vishweshwaraya, Kantrajars, A.R. Banerjee, and finally Mirza Ismail. Each of these people have been discussed in some detail, but largely he has, the chunk of the book is dedicated to Sir M. Vishweshwaraya, and then a fairly large chapter on Sir Mirza Ismail is there. But he has spoken about all these divans, except I think the first one or two, he has interacted personally with most of the others. Starting from P.N. Krishnamurti, I think he has interacted with all the divans of Mysore, and he knew them very well. So that adds a certain credibility to DVG's narration. There is a important distinction between what was happening in the early days and today, and that is what DVG calls the importance of the local officer. There was a certain hierarchy in the administrative system. So there's the Sheikhdar, Amaldar, subdivision officer, deputy commissioner, and so on. When something was under the ambit of the Sheikhdar, the Amaldar would not interfere unless it is impossible for the Sheikhdar to solve this problem. When something was under the ambit of the Amaldar, the district commissioner will not interfere. So even if somebody tried to escalate the matter and go above the Amaldar and complain to the district commissioner, he would first say, please go and meet the Amaldar and sort it out with him. So the hierarchy was respected. And Amaldar was completely responsible for the administration of a taluk. And all the citizens of the taluk agreed that he was their leader and they accepted him. It was the role of the senior officers to ensure that the junior officer's position is respected. Because if somebody is a friend of the deputy commissioner and seeks some favor, and just for the sake of one person, if he puts down the Amaldar, then the entire administration system becomes weakened. So the Amaldar was kind of the Sutradhara, and then above him we had all this thing and deputy commissioner. And deputy commissioner had the final say in all matters concerning a district. Even the government would not roll out a hukum, a government order, without consulting the deputy commissioner. So for a common person, the deputy commissioner was synonymous with the government. And DVG says deputy commissioner had the dual powers of anugraha and nigraha. So nigraha is the aspect of control or restraint, law enforcement, and anugraha is grace, the aspect of social welfare. He was capable of undertaking any welfare measures. Like the adage, dharmo rakshati rakshataha, if the citizens protect the dignity of the official in power, he in turn will act in the interest of these people. So this respect for the official from the side of the people and the social welfare schemes from the side of the official, these are mutually dependent, is what DVG says. Over a period of time, this principle became fragile. DVG writes, a few people may say that the pride of the local officer was first pricked during the tenure of Sir Mirza Ismail Sahib. I can't say that it is a completely baseless allegation. Now, a lot of prominent members who were close to the Diwan would call on him at the drop of a hat, and the Diwan, owing to certain pressures or maybe community feelings, would take decisions without consulting the lower officers. And I think this is my reading of this episode. Whenever we are not able to separate religion from state, when the religion overtakes the position of the state, especially in the case of the Semitic religions, which is almost like a religious imperialism. Whether it is Judaism or Christianity or Islam, it is a sort of religious imperialism. Therefore, when the state is not imperialist, when the state is secular, separated from religion, invariably they value the religion more than the state. Even today, many times, when a person from a Semitic background is holding public office, it becomes very easy for a person of similar faith to influence their decision, because there is a innate bonding based on religion, which is far superior to the bonding based on region or nation. So maybe that is one of the reasons why people were able to influence Mirza Ismail, although he was probably not a religious person or a religious fanatic. And in fact, many of the contemporaries of Mirza Ismail have written very highly about him, and he was a very efficient administrator. But in those instances where the religious element came into picture, for example, during the Ganapati Galabhe, there we see a different picture of the individual. Well, let that be. In the pre-independence era, the administrative branches of the Mysore state were the king, the Maharaja of Mysore, then the British resident, and then the public services, which is a circle of salaried officials who were part of the civil service, like the IAS, IPS, and so on. Now, even today we have this third category of civil services, which everybody is familiar with. And DVG discusses the first two categories, which is the Maharaja and the resident. Some people had this opinion that the Maharaja's authority was merely in name. He had no real administrative responsibility. It was limited to endorsements by means of a rubber stamp. Neither did it involve any real administration, nor did it bear much consequence. Straight away, DVG says, such a view can be termed prejudiced and impertinent. A pragmatic observation suggests that all those who occupied the throne of Mysore made significant contributions that impacted the state's administration. When Chamaraja Wadiyar X became the king, he was still very young, and it was Diwan Rangacharya who was his mentor. Similarly, when Chamaraja Wadiyar, when after the time of Diwan Rangacharlu, it was Diwan Sheshadri Iyer who became a kind of mentor to Chamaraja Wadiyar X, and after his sudden demise in 1894, he became a great support to the Queen Regent, Vani Vilas Sanidhanam. Here I must mention a little bit about Maharani Kempananjamma Vani Vilas Sanidhanam. She was 28 years old when her husband died, and she had 5 children, and most of the time she was spent in raising these 5 children, in addition also to learning Kannada and English and Sanskrit. Suddenly she had now become the Queen Regent. For somebody like her to be accepted as a Queen Regent by the British itself shows that they trusted her abilities. And the fact that there was some discussion between what is going to happen after the sudden death of Chamaraja Wadiyar X, the moment it was decided that she would be the Queen Regent, Sheshadri Iyer immediately supported her in all the activities, and she made a lot of contribution to the state, and especially for women and the backward communities. Subsequently, after the fourth, Krishnaja Wadiyar IV became old enough to govern, he ascended the throne, and he was a king who followed the constitutional monarchy. And many people, even in the previous generation, who have spent a great part of the 20th century, have great regard for Nalvadi Krishnaja Wadiyar, who as a very, very visionary and brilliant ruler, and also interested in the welfare of his subjects. It was during his time that the representative assembly came up, the legislative assembly was created, and he was also very interested in knowing what happens around his kingdom. He would travel, and there's an interesting footnote that DVG adds. When he was going somewhere near Chitradurga or Baba Budangiri, there was a temple on the mountain, and while he went to the temple and paid respect to the deity and was coming back, there was a big thing written in black letters: Raja Balanayaka, Mantri Utanayaka, Sachiva Sardaranayaka, Rajya Anayaka, Nine Nodo Vinayaka. So this was the kind of initial response that people had, because they thought he's a young and inexperienced guy, and what is he going to do? He was very aware of these things and tried his best to ensure that he acts in the welfare of the people. The Maharaja had many ways to understand the pulse of the people. One is he himself would travel quite widely. He would get information through people who are very close to him, ministers and other people. He would take in all the information, think about it, and see what really makes sense, what will be lasting impact for the state, and then offer advice to his ministers. And constitutional monarchy is something where the king is working within the framework of a well-established system. But he doesn't defy the ministers, he advises them, he supports them. The minister is accountable for the entire administrative effort of the government, but the monarch keeps him in check. This was a system prevalent in Mysore from 1881 to 1948. Many times when I look at this, I feel the constitutional monarchy makes more sense for a country like India even today, because it is such a large and dynamic and diverse country. The Western concept of democracy that was blindly imitated and copied and brought to India probably is not for the really for the welfare of the country. So the basic tenets of democracy may be valuable, but the manner in which it is being implemented all these years has raised many questions. And in some sense, when we say democracy, automatically we are saying that it is not meritocracy, it is more a popular vote. The second aspect of the administrative system was the resident, the British resident. Before 1881, this kind of officer was not there because it was a direct rule of the British government. Some people started labeling him as a political agent. DVG categorizes the duties of the resident into three different branches. One is to ensure that the rules and requirements of the pacts and treaties made by the rulers were being adhered to in a desired manner. Supervising aspects such as, is the ruler's administration acceptable to his subjects? Is the king working for the progress of his province? And third is keeping an eye on matters such as, are these efforts in the province aiming to inflict losses or pose dangers to the British rule? Periodically, the resident would make reports and share it with the viceroy or the governor general. Under the pretext of fulfilling his duty, it was not uncommon for the officer to pose unfounded, irritating questions to the Indian kingdoms, display impertinence, or write a complaint just because he is upset with a certain individual. So these kind of residents caused hindrances and they posed threats to the governments. Also, some of the local people who were smart, they became very friendly with some of the residents, tried to influence the government. Even today, we see this colonial mindset in some instances where the New York Times or BBC or Ilhan Omar or these people from living in some other part of the world, they express their concern about the state of affairs in India. They express a deep concern about caste violence in India, human rights violation, where in their own countries, children are being slaughtered by gunmen every other day. They don't have anything to say about that, but they are keeping a close eye on the activities in the India-Pakistan border. So even today, that mindset has not gone. Who is America, who is United Kingdom, who is France to tell India anything? Which we are as good as equal, or we are far more superior to them in many other cases. But even today, that mentality is there. And of course, anybody is free to say anything. So we cannot stop Germany or UK or France from telling anything about India. But our own press, our own English media is so crazy that they publish all this as very important news. So even today we are valuing the words of the older colonial masters. Whereas you contrast that with the way Vishveshwaraya behaved during the Darbar of the Mysore Palace. On the occasion of Dasara or the birth anniversary of the king or so on, there would be a Darbar. And the Darbar would have Europeans as well as Indians. All the Europeans would be seated on chairs and the Indians would be made to sit on the ground. Vishveshwaraya said, this is not fair. We will have either make everybody sit on the ground. Why should they be special, this thing? Everybody is equal in front of the king. Then the Europeans said, no, it's difficult for us because we wear trousers. How can we sit on the ground? And they complained. So then Vishveshwaraya said, well, let us have a different European Darbar for Europeans and Indian Darbar for Indians so that nobody feels greater or lesser. That is the kind of respect that Vishveshwaraya had when he was ruling, and very nicely DVG says, the position of Diwan was certainly not a bed of roses. A general observation that we can make with all these Diwans, before I start with Rangacharlu, I'll mention, many of them rose in the ranks of the civil service or some other public service, distinguished themselves in public life, and then they were chosen to be the Diwans. Whether it's Sheshadri Iyer or Rangacharlu or any of the Madhav Rao, all these people served in different public capacities. They knew administration very well. They knew the loopholes in the administration. They knew the strengths of the laws, how much these things are applicable in society in practice. And then they became the Diwan. So they were able to really make a change and do the work that they have planned. Whereas post-independence, it's purely based on popularity and how much of votes you can gather. It has nothing to do with your competence. A person who is competent in getting votes will become a minister, will become a whatever MP, MLA, and so on. And the administrative abilities is not at all a requirement in the present scenario. So when we look at some of these things, I feel in today's context, a lot of times we are going away from merit in different dimensions. This is something we have to recognize, and it is very nice to say India, Vishwaguru, we are going to become the biggest economy and we are going to do all this. Unless these things are taken into consideration, the Vishwaguru will be a distant dream. Chettipunyam Rangacharlu, DVG calls him the first proponent of democracy in India. He died in, I think, in the 1883 or sometime around 83, and DVG himself was born in 1887. So there is no chance that he has met Rangacharlu. But even as a, I think, 20-year-old young lad, DVG had a desire to write a biography of Diwan Rangacharlu. That was the sort of impact that Rangacharlu's personality had on the young D.V. Gundappa. He writes, I wrote a fairly exhaustive treatise about Rangacharlu in English and Kannada. That was 55 or 58 years ago. The aspect of his history that caught my mind and firmly fixed itself in my psyche was his understanding of the democratic system such a long time back. So there is no doubt that DVG was a huge proponent of democracy, but as we go through the pages and to the epilogue, DVG begins to question the nature of democracy that we have in India today. One of the important elements of democracy is the representation of the people. So a representative assembly is a very, very fundamental idea in democracy. In 1881, when the British gave power of the Mysore kingdom back to the royal family, it was an idea that was in Rangacharlu's head that a representative assembly must be created. But this had to be done not in a big way, because it would catch the attention of the Britishers and it would create a problem. So he did not organize any ceremony for its inauguration. He had no trumpets blown, no pavilions erected, no stages built. Here is an extraordinary and unprecedented venture, a great visionary idea. But how was it implemented? Very, very silently. When the Maharaja Chamarajendra Wadiyar X, he took the reins of the kingdom in 1881. During the Navaratra Darbar, it was common for a lot of important personalities from the state to attend that. And when they all had come for this Navaratra Darbar, he used this opportunity to create an informal gathering, a friendly get-together, and started discussing the state of affairs of the kingdom. So in a very friendly manner, unentangled by rules and regulations, the representative assembly began. By these discussions, Rangacharlu learnt a lot about the requirements of the people, and he felt that this will gradually eliminate the gap between the government and the citizens. He also got the opportunity to put this idea forth to the commissioner, revenue secretary and advisor of the commissioner, Gordon, the British commissioner. He had worded it like this: to learn the opinions of the citizens, a representative assembly consisting of prominent farmers, traders, and other people of eminence shall be instituted. But the British immediately saw a threat in this and they rejected the idea. He acted as if he has dropped the idea, but at the first opportunity when it showed itself, he was ready to bring it back into action. And unfortunately for us, he died at a very young age of 52. Rangacharlu was only 52 years when he died. He would study very deeply. He was interested in a variety of subjects. DVG has looked at the books of Aristotle that he had deeply studied and made notes. He was a big admirer of John Stuart Mill. And in his copy of Mill's representative government, Rangacharlu had made side notes and detailed study of this. Of course, DVG says I couldn't read anything because his handwriting was so bad. It was like some worms crawling on the paper. And Rangacharlu himself never liked his handwriting. He would always dictate and have some Narayan Rao or Annaji Rao or somebody write down who had a neater handwriting. And similarly, he was not very careful about the manner in which he dressed. It was not a rare sight for him to see a wrong button tied in the wrong hole. And when his wife would complain, he would say, "Am I Madhav Rao? He has to go and hang out with all these British ladies and everything. What work do I have doing all this?" But he was always on his toes. At a moment's notice, he would set out to go to Mysore or some other place to check something. Almost on whim, he will just climb a train. And those days, the train system was still a novelty. It was not so organized like today. So he would just go to the railway station, climb the train and go to Mysore or wherever. A couple of times this happened. The traffic manager of the Bengaluru railway station at that time was K.P. Puttanashetty, who later was knighted and became Diwan Bahadur, and he became the deputy commissioner. He was the Bangalore City Council, and the town hall which we have in Bangalore is named in his honor, K.P. Puttanashetty. He was also Mysore Legislative Council member and so on. So he realized that Rangacharlu was constantly visiting these different places. What he had done was he had a set of Rangacharlu's clothes and some bedding brought from his house and kept it at the railway station. And the moment he sees Rangacharlu getting into the train, he would send his clothes and bed along with the train. And suddenly when Rangacharlu reached the whatever destination, he would find a set of clothes and his bed, everything ready. And on enquiry, he realized that it was Puttanashetty who was doing this. And later, of course, he rose in his ranks and became well known. British writer Malleson, who was written about Indian history and who knew Mysore intimately, he has described Rangacharlu as a dynamo. He was always on his feet. He could absolutely hated any sort of lethargy. He never knew laziness or sitting quiet. He was always up and about. In the early days when Chamarajendra Wadiyar the 10th was under the tutelage of Rangacharlu, so Rangacharlu used to live in a house called Satyalaya, and it was in the Bangalore Palace Road, and it would take about 5 or 10 minutes for him to walk down and come to the palace. So Chamaraja Wadiyar was very scared of Rangacharlu. So what would happen is when Rangacharlu comes to his place, if he sees him lying down and not studying, he will get upset. So the moment Rangacharlu will have a shower and get ready, and when he starts tying his turban, there will be a signal from one of the guards in his house to another guard about 100 yards away, and that guard will signal to another guard and so on. So like this, by the time Rangacharlu walks from his house to the palace, the young king would have woken up, got ready, and would be sitting with his books as if he is deeply studying. So by the time Rangacharlu comes there, he will see this king, deep study and very impressed. Oh, I'm very happy he's doing his work. It took almost 1 year for him to realize that he was being duped. And another occasion that DVG talks about is the Vasantotsava festival during Dasara, where the children of the royal family were running about throwing colors on each other and using some unparliamentary language. He was in the Jaganmohan bungalow in the first floor. He comes down and shouts at them and gives them a thrashing. He says, "Is this the way royal princes will speak?" And send them back. But that is a sort of respect that he had in the kingdom. Imagine that today, if you go and shout at some minister's son, you will probably be sent to jail. Whereas here, he had that freedom, and everybody knew that he was not wishing bad for them, but actually he was somebody who was very straight and wanted the royal family also to be disciplined. There is a notion that because Rangacharlu was originally from Tamil Nadu, although he was more fluent in Telugu than Tamil or Kannada, he was from Tamil Nadu, and there was some resentment among the people that he's a Tamilian and he's come here, why should he be here in, in the Mysore kingdom. However, Rangacharlu has worked for Kannada as well. This is something that DVG records in the last section of the episode on Rangacharlu. Had his interest and encouragement been absent for Kannada language and literature, the Kannada version of the Sanskrit play Shakuntalam by Basavappa Shastri would not have seen light of day. The Shakuntala Nataka company would not have been born. The collection of Sanskrit and Kannada songs titled Balika Gita Mukta Kalapa would not have been published. And he has also, so many of the scholars have contributed to this Balika Gita Mukta Kalapa that but for his support, we wouldn't have all these treasures. DVG includes a nice appendix by the grandson of Rangacharlu, ASR Chari. He has shared some of the episodes about his about his grandfather, of which 3 episodes are very interesting. One is that Rangacharlu wanted to bring to the notice of the Governor General the sad state of affairs in the British-ruled Mysore. That is from the period of 1831 to 1881, I mentioned that the British were ruling. So he wrote 50 years of British administration in Mysore, and with a pseudonym, a Mysorean. Now, this could not be published in India anywhere because it is seditious in a sense. He had to send it to London and get it published there. And by the time the thing got printed, Rangacharlu was slated to be promoted, and the ink had not yet dried when this bomb exploded. And there was a big problem. But at the same time, the way in which he had written this and objectivity of his writing did not stop him from becoming the Diwan, and the British allowed him to become the Diwan in 1881. Second is that he was a notable enemy of corruption in public life. And there are many stories that have been said about the way in which he tackled corruption. There was a Munsif who was notoriously corrupt, and Rangacharlu came to know about this. And the Munsif also came to know that Rangacharlu had been apprised of the situation. So he rushed to meet Rangacharlu to try and give some story. Rangacharlu knew that he had come. He was in the adjacent room, and there was nobody in his room, but he just in a loud voice, as if he was speaking to somebody, he started saying that I know that there are corrupt officials. They think they can come and tell some stories, and I will be I will be hoodwinked and so on and so forth. Within that period of time, this Munship got scared. He said, okay, if I'm going to be here for another few minutes, I have had it. He goes back home and promptly writes a resignation letter and sends it to Rangacharlu. And there is the third story that he narrates. Like I said, Rangacharlu was very careless with his dress, and he was not very sophisticated. He was more action-oriented. And his brother-in-law, Sir Bhashyam Iyengar, was a leader at the bar, and he was a very sophisticated person. His clients consisted of zamindars and rajas. They're all sitting in like a mini darbar. And because Bhashyam Iyengar is such a senior person, he was slowly weighing every word. He has to speak very carefully because who knows which Raja, which Zamindar will get offended. And Rangacharlu waited for a few minutes. He lost patience. This guy was speaking so slowly, and he says, "Very munda kodaka," which was his favorite term of abuse. Why don't you say quickly what you want to say instead of fumbling over it, stupid fellow? And all the other people are shocked because they don't know who this uncouth man wearing some funny attire is. He's talking like this to Bhashyam Iyengar, who is a leader. And finally, then Bhashyam Iyengar had to say, no, this is so and so, and he means well, and so on. So these are some of the anecdotes narrated by Rangacharlu's grandson. After the sudden death of Rangacharlu, I said he died at the age of 52, Seshadri Iyer became the Diwan. In fact, Seshadri Iyer was somebody who was handpicked by Rangacharlu for his sharpness. He was originally from the region of Palakkad, and when he had gone to, when Rangacharlu was working in the government service in the Madras presidency, he had to visit places like Coimbatore, Wayanad, and all these, and Palghat. There, in one such trip, he got introduced to the family of Sheshadri Iyer, and he handpicked him to come and work with him. Sheshadri Iyer also is one of the divans that DVG has not met, but one of his elderly relatives who was working as a Sheikhdar had met Sheshadri Iyer once, and DVG asked him, what was that experience like? You have met Sheshadri Iyer. Oh, what an impressive personality! He used to wear vibhuti. It was complementing his dark skin. Such a well-built person. He spoke with such panache. He walked so well, and what a great, regal bearing, and so on. He says, what did he say? Oh, he said something to somebody somewhere around him. I was, almost 15 yards away from the premises. He was like a tiger. How can you go close to him? Would they allow a small man like me to go anywhere? But why did you go there? What was your purpose? But people used to say he was such a great personality and what a great man. So I just stood there with the folded hands and I felt a great sense of satisfaction. And people like me, where do we stand? Just I wanted to get a darshan of him. This is the kind of impression that the common people had about Sheshadri Iyer. Unlike his predecessor, Sheshadri Iyer had a very legible handwriting. He would himself write all the hukums, and very neat, and his sentence construction also was very nice. But he would keep letters, tens and tens of letters pending. He would not reply to these letters for a long time. He was more interested in the construction of lakes and tanks in Hesarghatta, the Mari Kanive, Shivanasamudra, construction of the railway layout, and correspondence with the British government, and so many other day-to-day affairs. So once in every 2 or 3 months, he would inquire of his secretary what is the status of the letters. And when he would be told that there are a number of letters to be replied to, he would sit quietly for about 2 or 3 weeks and reply to all the letters. And this was also the style of working of H.V. Nanjundaya. DVG recalls that he would say how many files are pending. If the clerk said there are 10 or 20, he'll say, okay, what is the rush? We will do it. When he said there are 200 files pending, that is when his eyes will open. He said, okay, fine, I will look into it. 8 o'clock in the morning, he will leave his house. He didn't have the need of any typist or secretary or anything. He would sit quietly and work. Within a matter of days, all the files, everything will be sorted out. And this shows the level of competence these individuals had. They knew all the rules and regulations, all the laws. It was on their fingertips. Similarly, Balasundaram Iyer, who was the chief secretary to the Mysore government when Vishwesvaraya was the Diwan, used to work in the same way. So all the correspondence and replying of letters and looking at files, this would be done very quickly because they knew their subject so well. Sheshadri Iyer was very competent in his work, and there is another trait that has to be mentioned, is what DVG says. He was never a person who bothered about the endorsement of people. I know what is right, I will do it. A German historian defines the term people as the people is that part of the state which does not know its own interests. So, in other words, citizens of a state represents those people who are incapable of realizing what is good for them. So, Sheshadri Iyer came from this school of thought. People don't know what they really want. I know what they want. I will do it. You just keep quiet and listen to what I am saying. This will be good for you. So this is also like the parens patriae, where the king or the ruler is like a father to the citizens, where like a father, not today's father, but those days how the parents were very strict and telling the children what to do, and that would be a line that would not be crossed by the children. The advantage of this system of working, of course, was that things were very efficient. Things could get done very quickly without too much of deliberation. The disadvantage, of course, it was not representative and almost autocratic in nature. As we go through the different style of functioning of the divans, we see different human natures and what happens when a divan is very soft and respectful and nice. And when a divan is very forceful and autocratic and decisive, both have the pros and cons. We have to look at these things objectively to learn from them. Sheshadri Iyer was the divan during the rule of two monarchs. One is Chamarajendra Wadeyar the 10th, and after his demise, the Maharani Kempa Nanjamanni, or the Vani Vilasa Sannidhanam. On the one hand, the Maharaja was young and inexperienced in Chamaraja Wadeyar. By the time he could be trained and became a good king, he unfortunately passed away. Now again, he has to start with the Queen Regent and work with her. Although initially there was some clash, which I'll come to later, he very quickly accepted the position of the Queen Regent and began working with her for the welfare of the state. So the power generation at Shivanasamudra, the Marikanime Dam, which is also called the Vani Vilas Sagar Dam, the reservoir at Hesargatta, all these things are happened during the time of Queen Regent and Sheshadri Iyer. When we look at the personality of Sheshadri Iyer, it becomes very evident the importance of the statesman's ability to look at multiple things. A statesman has to be a generalist. He need not have deep understanding of a particular Shastra, but he must be able to grasp the philosophy of the Shastra very quickly. He was not an engineer, he was not a scientist, but when he was serving as a deputy commissioner of Tumkur, he looked at some of the foreign newspapers and got the idea of generating electricity in Shivanasamudra. Now, many people would have seen this article, many people would have seen the newspaper, but it didn't occur to anybody else. In fact, DVG says when he was in Kolar, in the reading room, there was a Wide World magazine, and there was a detailed article on motors and how the motors work and many details. And DVG says, even today I know only as much about motors what I knew at that time after reading the article. So, talent is like flowing wind in space. Who can reason when and in which way it blows? So looking at a newspaper article, sometimes people may get inspiration and develop. What we do know is that after reading this article, he got people like Captain Latbiner to send to England to find out about all the technology, and then he sent him to the US and get the information. So it's not just getting the idea, but actually bringing it to practice. Similarly, the reservoir at Hesargatta, for the water crisis in Bengaluru, he created a reservoir in Hesargatta and brought the water all the way here. For a long time, in fact, even I have heard it in my younger days, people used to say, what would you like to have when you go to somebody's house? I don't want anything, I will just have a little bit of Sheshadri Iyer coffee, which basically meant water, because he was the person who brought water from Hesargatta to Bengaluru. So after a period, Sheshadri Iyer, I think, died in 1902 or something. In my own lifetime, if I have heard Sheshadri Iyer coffee when I was young, you can imagine the kind of impact that he has had on the city of Bengaluru. The English scholar and historian William Wilson Hunter said of Sheshadri Iyer, he gave his head to Herbert Spencer and his heart to Parabrahman. So according to Hunter, Iyer devoted his intellect to the philosopher Herbert Spencer and his entire being to the Parabrahma Vastu, which is the ultimate truth. He is also a person who was a fine balance between ancient and modern. He respected Iha and Para, the material, which is requiring a scientific bent of mind, and the spiritual, which requires a Vedantic bent of mind. He had achieved this blend of both. One of the irksome episodes in Sheshadri Iyer's regime was with regard to the standing committee. In the representative assembly of Mysore, people like Venkata Krishnaya and few prominent leaders, they had a complaint that the government treats us like a gang of petitioners in the sessions of the assembly. We are not just petitioners, we are qualified citizens, we are officially recognized nationalistic citizens, and we have a specific position in the government administration. So we will appoint a standing committee. The representative assembly must appoint a standing committee with these kind of people, important people. And out of this, people like Venkata-krishnaiah and Advocate D. Venkatramaiah, Srinivas Rao, Nanjun Rao of Davangere, all these people have to be there. And then they said, okay, we will take it up. And after a year, again, in the Representative Assembly, there was a commotion. What about that committee? He says, which committee? We appointed a committee. Well, it is for you to find out. The government doesn't know any such committee. Then again, 1 year later, somebody asked, what happened to the committee? The committee is dead. Is it burnt or buried? What would you like? You can choose. So this is the kind of arguments that used to go on back and forth. DVG writes here, however, nobody lost their sleep over this. Nobody's meal was disturbed. This merely became a subject of humor for those who used to read the newspapers. The reason for this being that there wasn't any disturbance caused by the government or the people's peace. There might have been hundreds of people who opposed Seshadri Iyer, but there were thousands who believed if the government is doing something with a noble intention, the outcome of it shall also be good. And there were 10,000 people who didn't bother. Which is true even today. There will be few people who oppose, some more people who are very supportive, and lot more people who don't bother. There was a resident called William Lee Warner, who was a very intelligent, influential person. At that point of time, in the Representative Assembly, like I said, Seshadri Iyer was very autocratic, and he would, shut down the people who were speaking too much, and he was managing everything with an iron fist. When Lee Warner saw the way in which Seshadri Iyer was conducting the proceedings, he was very impressed. This is the way it should be disciplined, and he wrote a letter of appreciation. The manner in which you have conducted the session was excellent. This is how the mouths of the impertinent should be shut and suppressed, and all these things he writes. And Seshadri Iyer was very happy. He got a certificate from a British resident, and he shows it to his colleague Chanchal Rao. Chanchal Rao he served as a councillor to the Maharaja of Mysore. He was later a member of the Viceroy's Legislative Council. And the moment Chanchal Rao sees the letter, he gets really upset, and he says, you should be ashamed of this letter. You are finding happiness in something you should be lamenting about. I don't want to associate with you anymore. This democracy should flourish here, and this will help the British get further entrenched in this place. This is what, do you want this? And this is what the letter implies, that what you are doing is great for them, which is the British. And you have paid the way for it. I don't approve. And he, gives him a dressing down. I can't remain your colleague. I'm going to give my resignation to the Maharaja at this very instance. And the moment Seshadri Iyer hears these bitter words from a very, very respected scholar like Chanchal Rao, he conveys his regret. He says, I am sorry, what should I do now? Yes, what you say is correct, I agree with you, what should I do now? He says, today, right at the start of the proceedings, convey your regrets about yesterday's imprudence, tender an apology to the assembly. And Seshadri Iyer was a person who was so magnanimous, without a second thought, he apologized and in deference to Chanchal Rao's words. There is a small aside about Chanchal Rao and his nourishment of dharma. Chanchal Rao had written, of course, a revenue manual, which was a standard textbook almost for a long period of time. But wherever he lived, he had always kept in the adjacent room some printing equipments. And many parts of the Rig Veda, the mantras recited during the Vivaha, the Yajnavalkya Smriti, Dharma Nibandhas, all these things, he would translate them word by word into Telugu, and he had kept a target for himself. Every day he has to print 2 pages. And in this manner, he has for years and years, he continued the self-imposed rule and brought out several works. And he established the Chaturveda Paripalana Sangha in the cantonment area of Bangalore. And he had named his grandson as Panini Rao. And DVG also talks about once when traveling with P.S. Shivaswamy Iyer in front of the Atara Kacheri. During the course of discussion, he just mentions the word Chanchal Rao. Immediately, Shivaswamy Iyer folds his hand and says, oh, my Paramaguru. Chanchal Rao was the first guru to teach public affairs in Madras, and the second was Srinivasa Raghavangar. If at all anything is there in Madras, it is because of these 2 people. That is how famous Chanchal Rao was. when we go through these volumes, the beauty is while DVG is talking about Sheshadri Iyer or Rangacharlu or Vishweshwaraya, there is some segue into some other personality and gives a small brief picture of them. So although the number of personalities that are covered are some 150 or whatever in the main episodes, when we look at the sub episode, like yesterday I spoke about this lecturer Venkatramaya who bought the Shakespeare dictionary, is just mentioned once in a small maybe 1.5 page or 1 page. But like this, he talks about so many personalities in addition to the main personalities that he has written about. Another aspect of these volumes is you never know what to expect. When you start reading these volumes, he will be talking, maybe he starts about talking about Bellavi Venkatnaranappa or Vishweshwaraya, whoever. He will suddenly segue into some humorous episode. Some of them are genuinely funny, some of them might even seem little silly. And the moment you begin grumbling, saying, "Oh, why is he put this silly episode here?" and your complaint has not even completed, immediately he will say something so profound and with so much of wisdom that you are blown away. There is deep insights into points of Shastra, some philosophical ideas, his own observation about society, some hitherto unknown information about individuals. So you never know what to expect. Although it is so relaxed and talking about different things, there is also that element of adbhuta which sustains through the reading of these volumes. DVG also writes how how Sheshadri Iyer was impacted by Annie Besant of the Theosophical Society, and also he travelled to Sringeri and met the Jagadguru Sachidananda Shivambirava Narasimha Bharati. He had great regard for the Sringeri Sannidhanam. And the Kumara Kripa guest house, what is there today, was actually his house, Kumara Bhavana. And that was you will be surprised to know, that was a part of Bangalore that was forest. And his wife was totally against going to that part of town because there is nothing there. Today it's at the heart of Bangalore. And Sheshadri Iyer built a very grand house and was ready to move there. And his wife said, "Nothing doing, it's some jungle. I don't want to go live there." But all the relatives and everybody pleaded with her. And finally, she gave this list of conditions under which she will move. I'm reminded of when P.V. Kane, the great Mahamahopadhyaya, Bharat Ratna P.V. Kane, bought a house built a house in Dadar. His wife said, "Who is going to go live in Dadar, which is somewhere outside the city? We are living in Malabar Hill. It's very comfortable here. Who is going to live in Dadar?" And finally, he had to sell that place because his wife was not ready to go there. So what was the outskirts? Now if he had a place in Dadar, it would be worth crores. So Sheshadri Iyer's wife gave this list of things. Devatarchana should be conducted there 3 times a day. During Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays and Mondays. Kunkumarchana, Sahasranama Parayana, Surya Namaskara, Rudrabhisheka must be conducted without fail. And once a week there must be some puja offered to married women and Brahmanas, Muttaides and Brahmanas. And every afternoon, the Puranas or epics such as Ramayana, Mahabharata should be narrated and sung. Only if all these conditions are fulfilled, then I will be happy to go and live there. So maybe these things were not even happening in the old place, I don't know. But now she has put all these conditions, and then he invites a scholar as remarkable as Hanagal Virupaksha-Shastri to come and speak every day. And later he gives a very nice certificate of recommendation to the Sringeri Sannidhanam, and Virupaksha-Shastri goes there. Rajya Dhurandhara is the title given to Sheshadri Iyer. Speaking about this, DVG says, in the English language, there are 3 words that are used to describe the standard of public servants. The first type is a politician. The second type is an administrator. And the third type is a statesman. There's a difference between a politician, administrator, and statesman. Politician is a person who involves in political activities. He is not accountable to anybody. He takes on various avatars such as chanting slogans on the street, conspiring in a closed room, knowing the pains that have afflicted the hearts of the people, familiar with the stunts that can stir up the hearts of the people, screams, ostentation, the facade of humility, strategy, threats, and so forth. This is politician. The politician treads the path trodden by doctors and lawyers in their chosen profession to achieve personal gains. Hustle, conspiracy, scheming, publicity, and so on. This is the description of politician. And I'm sure even today it holds good, maybe magnified tenfold or a thousandfold. An administrator is of a higher standard than a politician. And his responsibilities are clear and well defined. He has people above him, he has people below him. The officials above him have made his duties clear. Getting the work done from people below him, it is his responsibility. And he has to work within the rules and regulations, the legislations of the state. So if the state is like a human body, he is like the bones. This is what DVG says. A heavy and significant part of the body is carried by the bones. A statesman is of a higher grade than an administrator. And the word statesman is considered to have great weightage. And only a handful of people in public service can be called statesmen. And in typical DVG style, he lists out the 4 distinct qualities of a statesman. Statesman will make it very clear to himself what is possible for him to undertake and what he cannot undertake. He knows very clearly there are hundreds of things to do in the state. What I can do, what is in my ability given my resources that I can accomplish. He will plan his actions on the basis of priority. He never pushes something which is in first priority to second place. Even to perform the duties considered most necessary, he will consider the aptness of time. Are the time and place and situation conducive to begin the work? When is it appropriate to begin the task? What kind of place and situation are convenient? All these evaluation has to be done. Finally, practical wisdom. The financial and human resources to accomplish a project. How to stabilize over enthusiasm. How to make the uninteresting exciting. How to bind your opponents so as to make so that they don't open their mouths. And who should be unleashed against whom. All these things, strategic aspects, are elements of statesmanship. Seshadri Iyer had all these 4 qualities. He even got the admiration of a person like Lord Curzon. In Europe, DVG says, Bismarck and Cavour were the only 2 who had rose to fame as able statesmen. Just like Mysore, the states of Prussia and Naples were small provinces. However, those 2 states had the freedom to sign treaties or wage war with other states. If Mysore had been an independent kingdom, then Seshadri Iyer definitely would have expanded the territories and made it. If he was instead of being in the Mysore kingdom, if he was under Krishnadevaraya or after that, or Peshwas, he would have made it into a huge kingdom. Right at the end of the episode on Seshadri Iyer, DVG quotes 2 examples which are contrasting in nature. One is the shutting down of the Deshabhimani Patrika. The Deshabhimani made some jokes about the erstwhile king and almost insinuating a sort of anarchy in the state. And Seshadri was upset and one day just landed up at this place and zapti all the equipment, printing equipment was confiscated and thrown into some police station, and that newspaper nobody knew what happened to it after that. On the other hand, so one is where there is a very strict action, almost brutal, draconian behavior. He is the one who set up the Oriental Library in Mysore because a lot of manuscripts were getting old and lost and not cared for. So the treasures of the East must be preserved and propagated. So he created the Mysore Oriental Library. And a great scholar by the name of Mahadeva Shastri was appointed to translate into English many of the treatises and take care of the place. So like this we see, whenever we take the personalities who are in public life, and this is something again and again that SRR has often impressed upon me, is we cannot pass blanket judgments on public figures. We have to look at all their actions and then evaluate it on the basis of the things that they have done. So there will be some of the things that they have done, very valuable things that have happened, and some of the things they would have done in a manner which is detrimental to the state. So unless we see this from a larger point of view, we will not be able to give a honest judgment of the person's work. Seshadraya also worked for a lot of social reforms like child marriage ban and instituting educational institution for people from the backward community and night schools for adult literacy and so on. After Seshadraya Iyer's time as the Diwan, there are a few people who made some contributions but were not as noteworthy, and it was only in the time of Vishweshwaraya where again there was a major jump. And few of these people, like there was T.R.A. Tambuchetty and P.N. Krishnamurti and Madhav Rao. I'll say a little bit about P.N. Krishnamurti. There is a interesting episode that happens. DVG came into contact with P.N. Krishnamurti only probably in like 1911 or 12, which was 4-5 years after he had stepped down as a Diwan, which was in 1906. And he was enjoying his retired life in Purna Prasada, which was his bungalow. Every time DVG would go there, there would be a large room in the first floor, and P.N. Krishnamurti would be sitting there. And the moment he would cross the threshold and enter the room, somebody would say, "Oh, DVG is here, Gundappa is here, or so-and-so person has come." Immediately there will be a person who will say, "Arrange for refreshments." And this would be somebody, Krishnachar, go fast and get the thing. And the Krishnachar will tell Ramacharya, Ramacharya will tell Gundacharya. So like this, all the message will be passed. And then one of them will come after 5 minutes and somebody will bring a coffee. Then next 10 minutes later, somebody will bring a refreshment. And then somebody will bring water. This is the manner in which all these acharyas were standing, stewards were standing on the staircase. And the moment some excise commissioner, then one of them will say, "Oh, he's not in town, he has gone to Tumkur or he's gone somewhere else." No, not Tumkur, he's gone to Shimoga. And somebody will say, "Not Shimoga, he's gone to Kolar." So like this, there was this whole series of discussions. And DVG says at the end of the day, there is no use of these discussions. It would go from one place to the other. The only satisfaction we would get is that we spoke today. That was the only thing which was satisfying. Otherwise, it was totally meaningless conversation. P.N. Krishnamurti was from an aristocratic family. He was the descendant of Diwan Purnaya, the grandson of Diwan Purnaya, and he was very soft-spoken and respectful and so on. Therefore, the administrative activities under P.N. Krishnamurti became slow and lethargic. And that too, when you contrast it with somebody like Seshadraya, who was a firebrand and getting work done, here the administrative establishment would have been used to that sort of strong personality. Here, P.N. Krishnamurti was a person who would request and be very nice and kind and so on. There was a slackness that developed. And he was a person who could not detect fraud and deceit, which is a quality which is very important for a statesman, is you must be also able to detect fraud. It is not that a lot of P.N. Krishnamurti's time did not have eminent and intelligent people. So there was H.V. Nanjundaya and Shamarao and Narasimharaj. D.M. Narasimharaj was a very, very sharp person. Despite all this, there was a certain slackness that developed. And also there was a accusation that he was partial to Madhvas. P.N. Krishnamurti was not really responsible for it because he was a very broad-minded person. In fact, he had invited the Sringeri Jagadguru to his house and performed Pada Puja and everything. But the people around him were sort of bigoted, and they were used to make fun of smartas and so on. However, all these things added to the problems that P.N. Krishnamurti faced as a Diwan. After P.N. Krishnamurti was V.P. Madhav Rao, who was also, somewhat like Seshadraya, a strong personality. He had been the Inspector General of Police, and In fact, after the time of Sheshadri Iyer, there was a sort of tussle between the supporters of VP Madhav Rao and PN Krishnamurti. And finally, PN Krishnamurti became Diwan. So Madhav Rao said, there is no hope for me here, and he went on to become the Diwan of Travancore between 1904 and 1906. After that, he came back to the Mysore kingdom to become the Diwan. In his time, there were two parties. One was called the Mysore party and the Madras party. So, Bindiganavale Krishna Iyengar, who had become the deputy commissioner of Kolar, he was from the Mysore party. This was the party which said Mysore is for Mysoreans, not for other people. The Madras party was with people like Sheshadri Iyer, Rangacharlu, who said that Mysore is for everybody from India. Another feature that we see when we go through this volume, especially the fourth volume, lot of the disputes that we see today have their origins in the past. Even then, when there was a dispute between the water sharing between Tamil Nadu and Madras province and Mysore province, this Karnataka is only for Kannadigas versus Karnataka is for everybody, or Bangalore for Bangaloreans and Bangalore for this distinction and this tussle has existed even in the past. Even today we find these people who go and their great show of their Kannada-ness is to remove all the Hindi signs in the metro. If they really have the guts, let them remove the English signs and have only in Kannada. Then we will accept that, yes, this is a true Kannadiga. But they are very happy to remove the Hindi sign, but they want to retain the English sign because they are scared for whatever reason, I don't know. So like this, it is not new. So when we look at the history of a state or the history of a kingdom or a history of a country, we see a lot of things are recurring. So that also gives us some ideas in the how we can deal with those similar problems today. Now, I mentioned that there were these two parties, and there were some members who wanted to belong to both parties. So, in the morning, they would show up at P.N. Krishnamurti's house at Purna Prasada, wearing the mudras and all the black angara on the forehead, and they will be chanting Sumani Manjari or Sumadhva Vijaya and all these things, and they want to be recognized as Madhvas. And then 15-20 minutes later, they will wipe out all these marks and show up at VP Madharao's place and Patna Bhavana, and then they will speak Kannada with a Tamil flavor, with a Kumbakonam accent, so that they appear as if they are part of the VP Madharao's community. There is an interesting segment called Conspiracy of Lawyers, where if the judge was a person from the Tamil provinces, he was originally from the Madras presidency, let us say somebody like Jairam Iyer was the Munsif, then while arguing, they, instead of saying my client's money, they will add a Tamil flavor, my client's money. And then they will say whatever the la and na, they will replace with la and na. Then instead of saying early, they will say early. And in between, they will just say na solradu or om or avaladan. Just, almost in a forgetful sense, so that the judge will think, oh, he is also a Tamil. And this sort of influencing of the judge or influencing of the higher officials was a sort of strategy used by people. Here, after DVG mentions all this, he makes a very, very pertinent observation. I am not suggesting that either Madhav Rao or P.N. Krishnamurti supported the growth of such party loyalists. They had nothing to benefit from the parties by nurturing them. Back then, the state was not democratic. No political community was strong enough to create a future of great authority for either Madhav Rao or Krishnamurti. The power rested in the Maharaja's mind and the British residents' approval. When we see this in the light of what is happening today, it becomes very clear that in a democratic setup, it is so easy to influence the other people, and it is so important for each politician to have his dedicated band of sycophants. When Madhav Rao could not become the Diwan in Mysore, he went to Travancore, I said, and even in Travancore he became very popular. DVG writes, in my consideration, 3 of his attributes are extremely necessary for an administrator. an attractive appearance and oratory, so a good personality, efficiency at work, and excitement in the face of novel ventures. This is really important because often and often in public life, the moment a new idea comes to the fore, the politician or the ruler or the IAS officer, they will say, well, let us have a committee, very good idea, let us discuss this, and it never goes anywhere. There is a lot of lethargy for newness because anything could be a political mistake. So they want to be very, very careful. But if a leader has excitement in the face of novel ventures, there's a great possibility of going forward. DVG writes, he had such an impressive personality and physical appearance that even in a huge hall filled with a lot of people, if he walked in, everybody will look at him and say, who is this person? He's so resplendent. Even during VP Madhavrau's time, there were two incidents that tainted his rule as Diwan. One was the gag law to silence the newspapers, the Mysore Newspaper Regulation Act of 1908, where it was basically a press gag. And the other one was he had the compound wall or the exterior wall around the Jnapaka-chitra-shaale Shetty's Sabha Bhavana broken. The reason possibly was Advocate D. Venkatramaya was the lawyer for Dodana Shetty, and he was from the Mysore party. Now, another important person in the Mysore party was Venkata-Krishnaiah, who was called the Tataya, Mysore Tataya, the grand old man of Mysore. When Mysore Venkata-Krishnaiah, who was, so to say, an opposition member of VP Madhavrau, and he did not agree with VP Madhavrau in many ways, but when Venkata-Krishnaiah's son Subbaiah fell ill due to typhoid when he was a student in law college in Thiruvananthapuram, Madhavrau, who was the Diwan of Travancore at that time, immediately went there, learnt of the situation. He made all the medicine and the doctors available for him, and he wrote a letter to Venkata-Krishnaiah telling him of the situation. When he came there, he was well received and took care of Subbaiah with great affection. So, although there are although politically they may be different ends, they had a lot of personal affection. And we see this even, I had mentioned last time, when Bengaluru Nagaratnama wanted to raise funds. At that time, DVG wrote a letter to the Arcot Ramaswamy Naidu, who was a Ramaswamy Mudaliar, who was a political opponent of DVG in some sense. But Ramaswamy Mudaliar immediately organized a fundraiser, and Bengaluru Nagaratnama was able to raise the necessary funds. Also, VP Madhavrau's generosity was something which is as far as the common people were concerned. There is an episode of Chappalli Vishweshwara Shastri of Bangalore, who had gone to meet Madhavrau with some request, and he says, I would like, some small scholarship for my son. And he goes with a very, very simple petition, and Madhavrau says, you don't even know how to make an appeal. Absolutely no problem, I will help you, and so on. Later, when DVG was writing about Diwan Rangacharlo, this great Vidwan Chappalli Vishweshwara Shastri tells DVG, what did Rangacharlo do? He just saved money for the government. He was a stingy fellow. You should write about VP Madhavrau. He was the one who knows what generosity means. Again, we see the way in which different people see the public figures. Madhavrau was very friendly with the different communities. He supported the Murugarajendra Mahaswamy when he came here. He supported the creation of the Vokkaliga Sangha, and he was widely respected, and also he knew the fact that he had some enemies, and the people from the Mysore party were very much against him. By this time, I think DVG is already under the influence of M. Venkata-Krishnaiah, who was a sort of mentor for his journalistic pursuits. And he wrote an open letter in English to VP Madhavrau and signed it as Hosur Mari. He had not given his name. It was a very strong open letter. Then he also wrote a short story called Pishacha Rodana. And it was published, and some 10,000 copies of each of these were published and distributed in the Congress Convention in Madras. Both of them, these were anonymous. Now, what happens later is one afternoon he was going in Chamarajpet, and Gopal Iyengar, who was the elder brother of M. Srinivas Iyengar, the editor of the Mysore Standard, he sees DVG, he says, come here, and he takes him into some Agaram Ram Reddy building, which was probably a Sunday, there's nobody there. He says, you are the person who wrote these two articles under these fake names. Open letter to V.P. Madhavrao and Pishacharodhana. So admit it. He says, yes, I have written. It's like, first of all, you have written something which is very cheap, okay, and it is very, very trivial. Secondly, it is anonymous. Now, if you had written the same thing in your own name, at least I would have admitted you are courageous. Now, you would have neither courage nor profundity. So, this is something I will definitely not approve of. And he then says the aged cheat has utilized an innocent boy like you for an inappropriate task. I am guessing it must be Venkata Krishnaya. So he says, you are this is not done, and he says, you must promise me that you will never write anything anonymously. Whatever you write, you own up to it. And DVG says, I hope I have in the last so many years I have maintained it. To my knowledge, I have not violated what I have promised Gopal Iyengar. After V.P. Madhavrao, the next Diwan was Tanjavur Anandrao. The Anandrao Circle in Bangalore is named after this T. Anandrao. His father, Sir T. Madhavrao, was the Diwan of Vadodara and Travancore, very well-known political scholar as well. He has a lot of lectures on these political analysis and governance and so on, which I'll come to in a bit. Anandrao was the assistant commissioner of Mysore, and he was also the person responsible for stopping and kind of resolving the Mandipete Bandh. Speaking of Anandrao's governance, DVG says, it ascended not to a 6 nor did it decline to a 3. So it was a status quo. His tenure of 3.5 years can be likened to a moderately paced bullock cart, smoothly journeying on even road without ups or downs, rises or falls, lethargy or cheer. However, this is also not easy to accomplish, because when something is going well, to ensure that it continues well also requires certain amount of competence. In fact, when Anandrao became the Diwan, all his friends were like, you should get a bigger house, a fancy place, you tell the Maharaja, he will approve it. And the Maharaja also approved it. But then Anandrao said, I don't want a bigger house, I am very happy where I am. And he had a small enclosure erected for visitors near the building of the, where he was residing. And he was very particular about time, very methodical. He had some eyesight problem, so he could not see very well. So therefore, he had created a certain pathway so in his house, so he could walk. If he walks 4 times, it would amount to 1 mile. So he'd wear some green color glasses and walk every day. Exactly, he would go there, turn here, walk back. He knew this would be 200 meters or 400 meters. If he walks 4 times, it will become a mile. So that was a sort of calculation that he had. Once the Right Honourable V.S. Srinivasa Shastri was slated to give a lecture in Bangalore. He was a member of the Servants of India Society, which was started by Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Just the previous evening, there was a lecture of a Christian missionary which was cancelled for some reason. And Srinivasa Shastri was also supposed to give a speech the following day. And the government there was a government order which cancelled the event, which forbade Srinivasa Shastri from speaking. As soon as Srinivasa Shastri came to know that the lecture was cancelled, he said, let us go to Lal Bagh. And he took his friends Madhavaya and D.V. Gundappa and few other people. They went to Lal Bagh and had a humorous chit-chat, and they were just discussing about different things. DVG writes, what amazed me the most that evening was the fact that Shastri never spoke a word about the government or the cancellation of the event. He neither criticized anyone nor speculated the cause. Finally, when somebody said, what is this? They cancelled your event and you are just casually, discussing with us. He said, our Guru Gokhale has ordered us to neither display resentment nor independently criticize in times of such political oddities. If the concern is related to democracy or justice, it can be carefully analyzed and an appropriate action can be taken. And I don't have all the details. I don't have the data. So how can I create a hypothesis? How can I say? So I am also as baffled as you are, and I refrain from making judgments. This is so important for all of us to learn. Before knowing information, we should not pass judgment. It is so common today that you see some newspaper article, some WhatsApp forward, and you have made up your mind about a certain person or an event. We would not even have spared a thought to see if it is authentic, but we have very quickly come to judgment. And then, like I said, all these situations, we cannot expect where DVG goes. He will be talking about something like this and immediately goes into a historical description of the three parties. The one party which was just aligning to the British as much as possible, we do what the British says and ask for minimum concessions, like T. Madhav Rao, Anand Rao's father, he was of that party. Then the other was what was called the liberals, like V.S. Srinivasa-Shastri under Gokhale. They wanted dominion status, but we should not be very adamant. And the third was, of course, the party of Tilak, which was like lock, stock and barrel, the British has to leave India. Finally, DVG analyzes what is the reason for Anand Rao behaving in such a way, cancelling Srinivasa-Shastri's event. Possibly that Anand Rao felt that cancelling this might bring some, put him in the good books of the British resident. And that might have been the reason. And even there, DVG concludes saying, I'm not very sure what could be the reason. Anand Rao, when DVG met Anand Rao the first time in connection with his writing of Rangacharlu's biography, Anand Rao was very friendly with him. But a few years later, after he learned that DVG was also from the Liberal Party and very close to V.S. Srinivasa-Shastri, his behavior slightly changes towards DVG. Even so, when DVG writes about the problems of the Indian native states, he has quoted some sections from T. Madhav Rao's lecture. And when Anand Rao learns about it, when he meets DVG, he says, would you like to see the lectures? And he has about 20 or 25 lectures have been divided into two parts. One is concerning the fundamental principles of politics, such as what is a state, how should the structure be, and so on. And the second one is all about governance. So he says, you take the first bundle, finish reading it, give it back, then you take the second one. And DVG does so, reads all the 25. He says it's extraordinary. I think it should be brought out. It's a very, very great treasure. And you must allow me to do it. I will take care of everything. I don't want any remuneration. It should come out. And Anand Rao says, well, okay, how much is it going to cost to bring out these two volumes? So he said, the first volume may cost 1,000 rupees and the second volume another 1,000 rupees. About 2,000 rupees it will cost you. I don't want any money. I'm just talking about the printing and the publication. So Anand Rao thinks for a few minutes and he says, it's going to cost 2,000 rupees. I am a poor man. I don't have so much of money. And DVG is really upset. He says, you can do whatever you want, sir. Thank you. And he goes away. It is not that he didn't have the money, but possibly Anand Rao in 1910 did not know DVG's leanings. And now he knew that he was a Appata Shishya of V.S. Srinivasa-Shastri, decided not to encourage him in this matter. However, Anand Rao was a very benign and dignified person. It is not, there may be, DVG says, there may be personal anger or some sort of resentment based on some prejudice. But that doesn't make, just because somebody disagrees with me, doesn't make him a bad person. And he was great in many respects. He had a lot of generosity and he upheld truth and justice. He developed a grasp on method and procedure. And although he didn't venture into great adventures, he never fell short when it came to fulfilling things that were necessary. So he says the well in our house may not have enough water to fill the entire, to feed the, to quench the thirst of the entire community, but it is very important for our house. It suffices to take care of all our household needs, and even this is a matter of great joy. So with this, I'll conclude today's lecture. Tomorrow we will see the illuminant personality of Mokshagundam Vishveshwaraya. Thank you.